Hi, welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to start talking about pure competition. Pure competition. So what we're going to do is we're going to take what we talked about on an earlier set of videos on an earlier playlist. I talked about what does a company do, and one of the primary things that a company does is they go by inputs. They go by inputs, which we said could also be called resources. Inputs are also called factors of production, and really the inputs are just land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills. Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills. And so when a company goes and buys land, labor, capital, entrepreneurial skills in order to produce goods and services, that's called a cost for the company. So we talked about costs in another playlist. We talked about the production costs. And so when we go by land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills, when a company goes and does that, that generates costs for the company. And then the company takes the land, labor, capital, entrepreneurial skills, and they go make something. And when they go make something, that's called production. When they go make something, that's called production. So they're going to produce something. Maybe they're going to produce a television. So they're going to buy land, they're going to buy labor, they're going to buy tools, capital, they're going to hire entrepreneurs, managers, and so on, and they're going to produce televisions. And then once they produce the televisions, they're then going to sell those televisions in the output market. So they're going to sell their good or their service. For us, the good is a television, but it could be any good or service that the corporation is going to sell, and that is called the output. And when the company sells the output, the money that they make is called revenue. The money that they make is called revenue. And so the goal of the company is to maximize their economic profit. It's to maximize their economic profit. And the economic profit, I talked about that on a previous video. The economic profit is the revenue that the company makes, that's over here from selling the output, minus the cost of production, which is how much they pay for the land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills. And just remember this, when I say cost, I always mean both implicit cost and explicit cost. Implicit cost and explicit cost. So the explicit cost, that's the money that leaves the firm in order to pay for land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial skills. But don't forget the implicit cost. That's the money that the firm could have made, could have earned, the money that would have come in if they would have produced something else, So if we're talking about a pizza company, a little pizza place, and some of their explicit costs would be things like, what they pay for their chef, or what they pay for their tomatoes or their dough, all that kind of stuff. That's explicit cost. The implicit cost is the money that they could have made if they would have produced hamburgers instead of pizza. Okay, and so just remember, we're doing revenue minus cost, minus implicit and explicit cost, and that gives you the economic profit. And the goal of the firm is to maximize this. The goal of the firm is to maximize that economic profit. So to do that, the firm has to answer two questions, and that is, one, how much should they produce? How much Q? And then number two, what is the price that they should charge? What is the price? And so what we're going to start to talk about is the type of output market in which the firm sells its product. So when they sell their television or their good or service or whatever it is that they produce, they can either exist in a purely competitive market structure, which is what we're going to start looking at in these videos, or they could sell it in a monopoly environment, or in a monopolistically competitive environment, or in an oligopoly environment. So we're not going to worry about 2, 3, and 4 right now. We'll worry about those on some future videos. We're going to worry right now about pure competition. We're going to worry right now about the idea of pure competition. So let's say this. We want to say, what is pure competition? So to identify a purely competitive market, how do we know that we're in a purely competitive market? We need to know what are the characteristics. So the first characteristic of a purely competitive market is that there are many buyers and sellers. Okay, I don't know how many, but a lot. Many buyers and sellers, and they're all producing. All these sellers are all producing goods and competing with each other to sell those products to the many buyers that are out there. Now, the fact that there are many sellers all selling the good makes the firm what we call a price taker. The firm is a price taker. And what that roughly means, we'll talk about this in detail later, but what that roughly means is if a firm is a price taker, then that means that they have ultimately no control over the price. The price is determined by the market. Okay, the price is determined by the market. So this price is going to emerge in the market as a result of supply and demand. So supply and demand, if we just draw a quick little graph over here, we have a supply curve, you have a demand curve for a product, and that's going to generate an equilibrium price, and that's the price that the firm is going to have to charge. That's the price that the firm is going to take when it sells its product. We'll talk about that in more detail on some future videos. So the firm is a price taker. They do not have control over the price. The market determines the price. Number three, they produce homogeneous goods. That is to say that all these sellers are producing the exact same good. You cannot distinguish one company's good from another company's good. You cannot distinguish them. They're all making the exact same good, homogeneous goods. And then finally, number four is there is free entry and exit. That is to say, there are no barriers to firms coming into this market or firms exiting or leaving this market. So what might be an example of this? Maybe a fruit and vegetable industry might be, first let me say this. In the real world, there is no free entry and exit, okay? Any market, there's going to be some cost to entering. But what's an example of a market that gets close to free entry and exit? So an example of this might be a fruit and vegetable market, where maybe if I want to enter the fruit and vegetable market, I can enter simply by just growing some tomatoes in my backyard, and I could put up a little stand in front of my house with a little basket of tomatoes, and if you want to buy a tomato, you stop by, you give me $1, and you take a tomato. Okay, that's extremely low cost for me to enter the fruits and vegetable market. It's very low. So entry is almost completely and totally free. Okay, that's what I mean by free entry and exit, that there are no barriers to firms coming into the industry or firms leaving the industry. And this is going to be a really big deal when we begin to build our model. So that's all I need to say about it for now. But on some future videos when we build the model, that's going to become a really big idea. All right, so this has been Mr. Hagan on another video talking about pure competition. We'll talk about it more on some future videos. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next Econ Podcast.